was set, and about 3 years ago, an engineering friend of mine mentioned that there could be something potentially harmful with wireless technology. And so I started doing research, and I brought it before the school committee, and the school committee did their due diligence. And when they got to the point of seeing in the fine print that it says, do not keep this on your body or you will exceed the FCC guidelines, they decided that they would put precautions in place for Ashland Public Schools. And so hanging in all of our classrooms, we have a sign that advises the teachers to work with the children to make sure the Wi-Fi is turned off when it's not being used, to make sure the devices are turned off when they're not being used, to always keep it off of your body and on a solid surface, preferably a non-metal one because metal amplifies microwave radiation. And so I was very grateful that our school committee began to address this. What the scientists will tell us, however, is that the only solution to safeguard ourselves is to have hardwired connections with the wireless turned off. And we recognize that's a very tall order. And when they rolled this out, the school committee said they would like to be kept abreast of changes that come down the pike as time goes by. So I'd like to spend just a couple of minutes bringing you up to date on some important changes that have happened since we went ahead and adopted these practices. One is Senator Karen Spilka filed a bill to get our state legislators and leaders to start looking at this issue. When we were doing our exploratory exercises with this, we discovered that nobody at the state level, at the Department of Public Health, at the Department of Education, understood what this issue is. So if this bill advances, and it did get reported out favorably by the Joint Committee on Public Health, if it continues to advance in the future, then hopefully we'll have a commission set up at the state level. The Ashland Public Library began to do due diligence on this as well. And this winter and last fall, they hosted a 6-part series on electromagnetic radiation and health. And our Board of Selectmen met with me, and I spoke with them individually and educated them on things that had transpired since Ashland adopted our best practices. And I submitted a BAA grant application, and we now have in the Ashland Public Library a $400 scientific device called an acoustimeter that allows all of our residents to check this out for a week, go home, measure your spaces, and then decide what you might like to do about that. WACA Television was very gracious to loan resources, and we did a 23-minute video to show how to use the acoustimeter, and it actually walks through my home and shows all the exposure areas that I had in my home and choices that we made to reduce those exposures. Last summer, we had the distinct privilege of having a panel of world experts come to the state of Massachusetts, to the State House, and give a briefing. There was Dr. Deborah Davis, who's one of our nation's top scientists. She has earned a Nobel Peace Prize co-laureate appointment for her work on climate change. And she's also very, very invested in this issue. She founded the Environmental Health Trust, and she brought with her Frank Clegg, who was the former president of Microsoft Canada. He came down from Canada to tell us that our safety guidelines are not protective. Ours are about the same as Canada's Safety Code 6. Dr. Sharma flew in from India, and he is the gentleman in the Indian government who's responsible for setting their radiation exposure standards. And in the Indian government, they actually do their own studies, and Dr. Sharma brought their standards down 90%. So he's reduced it 90%. Frank Clegg is up in Canada now trying to do a similar thing with Parliament up there. And hopefully our government will start to do that soon. Last summer, at the beginning of the school year, the Boston Parents paper published this. It's a free magazine that's distributed in our libraries. And it has expert information in here from Camilla Reese, who has become electrohypersensitive. She's a high finance woman, and she's done a lot of work in this arena. It also talks about the work of Dr. Martha Herbert over at the Autism Lab at Mass General and the connections that she's finding with autism and other health issues and electromagnetic radiation. They also offer a sidebar that tells exactly what you can do to reduce your exposure. One of the most important things that I think the school committee will find interesting is a report that came out of Harvard last summer called Captured Agency, and it was put out by the Harvard Law School Center for Ethics. And it's a 59-page document, but this is what it looks like. And Captured Agency explains to us that back in the 1990s, when the first oncologist said, my patient just died of cancer, and the antennas on her cell phone line up directly with her tumors. Well, this is kind of a PR nightmare for the telecommunications industry. So they stepped forward and said, let us do the research and we'll take care of it. So they did. They put Dr. George Carlo in charge of I think it was $25 or $27 million study. He hired 200 scientists, and for years they did the science. And they came back and reported to the CTIA that this is carcinogenic, and the head of the CTIA said thank you very much and sent Dr. Carlo on his way without telling the public. Now, as this report discusses, the gentleman who was commissioning that study with the CTIA was named Tom Wheeler, and Tom Wheeler is now in charge of the FCC. And it is the FCC that sets the standards for how much radiation can be emitted from wireless and cellular technology. So that explains why we have standards that are set up here, and the biological science is showing the harm is being done way down here. So last year, world scientists got together and they sent an international EMF scientists appeal to the World Health Organization, to the United Nations, to the United Nations member states, and to the United Nations Environmental Branch, saying we need to take care of this and we need to take care of it now. And in it they outline 9 or 10 steps that have to be done. The very top is to protect children and pregnant women. We have to inform the public, and we have to create white zones or spaces where there is no electromagnetic radiation, so that those who are electrohypersensitive can go out into the world and access places like libraries and grocery stores and doctors' offices without getting sick from the ubiquitous radiation that we're now surrounded by. Another very important document that came out this spring is actually from the IEEE, the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, which is the same body that helped to set the FCC standards. The issue with the FCC standards is they only address the thermal effect, which means how much heat does it take from one device to heat the skin of the model they used, which is a 6-foot, 220-pound simulated military mannequin in the 90th percentile of fitness. There's never been any testing done on children. There's never been any testing done on fetuses, the elderly, or those with known health conditions. This report from the IEEE turns that thermal effect theory on its ear, and it concludes that we do have biological effects at the non-thermal level. This is a big one. 2 weeks ago, and the reason why I'm meeting with you tonight, is the United States National Toxicology Program has been doing a $25 million study on rodents. They've done an extremely controlled parameter where they have rats and mice being exposed to microwave radiation from cell phones, and then they have a control group that's receiving no exposure. In their preliminary findings, which they felt compelled to share with the public immediately, the rats are developing brain cancer and heart cancer. The control group is not developing any cancer. So this is going to turn the scientific credibility into something that we should now be paying extreme care to protect our children and to protect ourselves. Fortunately, in this journey, I should mention that when that panel of world experts came to Boston, they were gracious enough to hold a community public forum, and it wound up being right in Framingham, so some of us in this room went to that. And that night I learned that the work that you've done here on this has made Ashland Public Schools the first in the nation to address this. We are the first public school district to have any kind of precautions put in place, so kudos to you for your due diligence. So because of that, and because of the bill that we have in the legislature, other parents have found me from all over the country, and I get calls every week asking for advice on how they can help protect their children as well. There's one gentleman out in Petaluma, California, who has come up with a very inexpensive solution for turning off the wireless around our children. He's calling it an octawire, and I've got a meeting with Mr. Adams next week, and we'll sit down and look at that in more detail. But for very little money, we can actually hardwire our devices. And as Mr. Clegg from Microsoft Canada said, we're not saying no technology, we're saying safe technology. And if we can get our minds around hardwiring, we can certainly access all the technology we need, but without exposing our children to microwave electromagnetic radiation. So I look forward to meeting with Mr. Adams next week, and who knows, maybe we can go for some grant funding to help us with these solutions. Maybe we can pilot one classroom over the summer and see how this really works. But I'm asking for your support in listening and discussing solutions so that maybe by the beginning of next school year, we will no longer have devices emitting electromagnetic radiation in the space that our children spend 7 hours a day. For anybody who would like to learn a little bit more, the Massachusetts Attorney General is holding a listening session next Monday on energy and environment, and this topic will be discussed there among other environmental toxins that our society is faced with today. So,
where is SCC?
This is going to be in Worcester at the Mass Audubon's Broadmeadow Brook Conservation Center and Wildlife Sanctuary from 6 to 8 p.m. And I can send this out if anybody's interested. If there are any questions anybody has right now, I'd be happy to answer them, or I'd be more than happy to meet offline as well.
Thanks, Cece. We can't do questions during public comment,
Okay.
but certainly we've heard you,
Okay.
and we'll